I never imagined something as ordinary as the flu would become the turning point that would change my life forever. That day, I left work early, feeling weak, achy, and drained, thinking only of getting home, curling up in bed, and letting the exhaustion pass. I longed for the comfort of Homebeth's warm presence, maybe a bowl of her homemade chicken soup, the familiar sound of her slippers brushing against the kitchen floor. But what waited for me instead shattered the world I thought I knew. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed a truck parked in front. It wasn't familiar. Something about it made my stomach twist. Though at the time I attributed it to the illness coursing through me, I parked on the street, too fogged to give it much thought, and made my way toward the front door. I expected Beth to greet me with worry in her eyes, arms ready to catch me as I sank into her. Instead, the house greeted me with silence, that deep, unnatural kind, the kind that makes your skin bristle because it feels wrong. I called out her name, softly, at first, then again with a voice that wavered. Still no response. The silence, once merely strange, turned threatening. I moved slowly down the hallway, each step landing heavier than the last. Then, faint at first, I began to hear sounds, muffled, unmistakable, coming from the direction of our bedroom. Sounds of two people, tangled in intimacy. The kind of sound that doesn't need explanation. It confirmed every unspoken fear bubbling inside me. My heart pounded so violently I could feel it in my throat. A voice inside me begged me to stop, to turn away, to not look, to spare myself the image that would forever scar my memory. But something stronger, something colder, kept me moving. I reached the door, left ajar as though fate itself wanted me to see. And I saw Beth in our bed with another man. The image struck me like a steel-toothed trap. Time froze, the world shrank. Her body moved beneath him, her voice raw and unrestrained as she cried out words I'd never heard her say to me. Words that once might have made my blood stir now cut through me like glass. And in that single, brutal moment, everything I believed about us disintegrated. I didn't scream. I didn't burst into the room or demand explanations. My feet stayed rooted to the floor while my soul unraveled. It wasn't just betrayal I felt. It was an awakening. A strange, bitter freedom. Slowly, I pulled out my phone and pushed the door just wide enough to capture the truth. Her face twisted in pleasure, his hands claiming what once belonged to me. I snapped the photos quietly, evidence not for revenge, but for certainty, for the part of me that might later doubt what I had seen. You'll never forget this, I whispered to myself, slipping the phone back into my pocket. Then I turned. I passed through the garage without a sound, spotted a screwdriver on the workbench, and without hesitation, drove it into each of the tires on that man's truck. Petty? Maybe. But in that moment, it was the only thing I could control. I got into my car, shut the door, and drove. Not away from home, but from a version of myself that had died in that doorway. Tears came hot and fast, blurring the road as I drove. Without destination, I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't go back. I thought about everything about Beth, that man, how long it had been going on. But those questions became dust. What truly mattered was that 24 years of marriage had ended not with a conversation, but with the sound of my wife gasping another man's name. Eventually, I stopped at a clinic, picked up some flu medication out of instinct. Then I checked into a cheap motel across town. That night, feverish and heartbroken, I lay in a room that smelled like bleach and old carpet, trying to breathe under the weight of what had just happened. My phone lit up over and over with Beth's name, but I didn't answer. What could she possibly say that would matter? By morning, I knew I wouldn't be going back to work anytime soon. I needed time, not to grieve, but to think, to plan, because this couldn't be fixed, and I refused to let the rest of my life be shaped by her betrayal. That day, I made the first real decision in years. I called a lawyer. I withdrew my money from the bank, moved important documents into a safe deposit box, and began separating my life from Beth's. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. This was me reclaiming control, piece by piece. When I eventually returned to the house, Beth was in the kitchen. Her eyes were red-rimmed, face pale. "Peter," she breathed, her voice barely holding together. "We need to talk. Please give me a chance." I looked at her and something inside me felt as cold and still as winter. You don't need to ask for forgiveness, Beth, I said. There's nothing left to forgive. It's over. I saw you. I watched you wrap yourself around another man in our bed. She crumbled then, her legs folding beneath her as she dropped to the floor in a fit of sobs. But I love you. She wept. He meant nothing. It was a mistake. I stared at her, my hands clenched at my sides. A mistake, I said, my voice flat. The moment you let him into our home, into our bed, you ended us. This isn't a mistake. This is a choice. You made yours. Now I'm making mine. She reached for me, desperate, broken. Please don't leave. We can fix this, Peter. I still need you. I don't know what happened. I was looking for something exciting. But I want you, not him. I gently pulled my arm away. I don't need you, Beth, not anymore. The woman I once adored, admired, trusted now meant nothing more than a memory I needed to let go of. I looked at her one final time, the pain receding into numbness. I'm packing my things. Her voice rose in panic. Packing? Peter, please, talk to me. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said. The moment you let him in, you burned the bridge back to us. Beth collapsed fully, her sobs shaking the walls. It was just sex. Peter, it meant nothing. I love you. I turned my back to her. Her pleas were hollow now. Her cries were echoes of a woman I no longer knew. You say you love me, Beth, but what you did says something else entirely. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and painful quiet. I stayed in that small motel, filed for divorce, and resigned from my job. For the first time in decades, I had nothing tying me down, no wife, no home, no career. I was unmoored, but I was free, and in that vast freedom, something unexpected happened. Her name was Maureen McDermott. Fiery red hair, eyes the color of weathered sea glass, and a voice that carried both ache and laughter. We met through mutual friends, casually at first, but from the moment we sat beside each other, something clicked. She, too, had walked through the fire of betrayal. She, too, knew what it meant to be shattered. But with her, I felt peace, not just comfort, but clarity. We didn't just fall into each other. We grew together, slowly, deliberately. She didn't try to replace my past. She helped me rediscover my future. Each day I spent with her was a step further from the wreckage and a step closer to something real. Eventually, I realized it wasn't a coincidence we found each other. It was life quietly, gently offering us both a second chance. But betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment the story finally began. One day, standing on a mountaintop beside Maureen, wind in our hair, sunlight cutting through the mist like promise, I looked at her, and I knew. Life has a way of dragging you through the darkest valleys, only to reveal the most breathtaking views. What once tore me to pieces had somehow led me here, to love, to peace, to freedom. It was all because of a heart that broke so completely. It had no choice but to rebuild itself stronger.